Okay. My name is Pete Forsyth with Wiki Strategies, and this is the second video in a series we're calling Wikipedia 15 for 15. So in celebration of Wikipedia's 15th birthday this month, I'm interviewing 15 thought leaders from different areas. And so today, I'm very pleased to have with me Cathy Casserly. Cathy is the Vice President of Learning Networks for EdTech. She's a longtime leader in the world of open educational resources. And I first got to know her when she was, I guess, just before she became CEO of Creative Commons. So Cathy, welcome to our interview. And I look forward to talking to you. Is there anything you'd like to add about your background?
No, I mean, just thank you for inviting me. Wikipedia has always been a key cornerstone of the open educational resources movement, and I'm excited to talk with you more about it.
Okay, great. Well, I think for a starting point, let's talk a little bit about the Wikipedia content. So Wikipedia as an encyclopedia. There are articles about open education, about open educational resources, about Creative Commons. And of course, the people viewing this video may not really know much about that world. So what has been your perspective on that content? As you've browsed around Wikipedia, do you think it's pretty good? Do you think it's lacking?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of my earliest origins with Wikipedia were actually when I was at the Hewlett Foundation. It was the very beginning of OER, and we thought hard about content because we thought about where could the Hewlett Foundation use its funding and use its leverage to make the most difference in education for teaching and learning. And at that time, the web was just developing. People were trying to understand how to use it, what forms of content made sense, what would be valuable. And the big unknown at that point, although quickly gained traction, as we all know, was the short form article content of Wikipedia that gave people an introduction to a world that they didn't know about. And that capacity of Wikipedia to be able to do that, I think, has always been incredibly strong. I think there's always been conversations about some articles are stronger than others. Sometimes the quality is higher than others in certain articles. But I think what happens is the conversation evolves in that content. And for me, having been in the education space, what I see is we do a lot of recreation of content. Each teacher in K-12, for a long time in their history, created their own content that they kept on their own file cabinet, their paper file cabinet. And they would pull out these lesson plans to engage their 25 to 30 students. And now they sit on the desktop. And a few are beginning to share them more readily. But we have these incredible inefficiencies because we have teachers creating and recreating content.
Thousands of teachers basically doing more or less the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And they could be using that to localize the content, or they could improve the content, or they could think about a particular subset of students who are struggling with a particular concept and say, how do I take this base of knowledge and share it in a way that's appropriate for them?
Tweak it a little bit to make it reach this particular class of students a little better.
So for me, like, Wikipedia was just like opening that door to think about how you all come together and share. And I think one of the distinctions, though, with content, and particularly with content in the open educational resources world, you know, there would be a huge battle if we said that every teacher should use the same piece of content at the same point of time, you know, on a certain day when they're studying, you know, algebra or whatever it might be. Completely agree. But I also agree that we don't need as many forms of content. We don't need so many lost forms of content. We need a subset that's curated, that's of the highest quality, that the teacher community agrees to, that they can pick and choose from. And they can also build new content. It doesn't mean that new content can't be built. So I think in thinking about Wikipedia and thinking about content, you've created some great lessons for education. And I just, you know, one of them is my youngest son just went off to college. And I can remember when he was in middle school, he wasn't allowed to cite Wikipedia. It was forbidden. And I was pulling out the studies that we knew about Wikipedia and the quality of the content. He's like, you need to share that with my teacher, right? So, but now it's so accepted. No one even questions it because everyone knows you have to take that content. It provides a great first analysis, and then you can take it and dig deeper yourself. And that's a critical skill for all of us for lifelong learning.
Yeah, well, that's something that has always really fascinated me about Wikipedia and actually my beginning in writing for Wikipedia. I was I was fascinated by this opportunity to write about things as I was in the process of learning about them, and to as I was finding an article and finding a good source, that I could write something up and leave that citation, and that someone else might improve it before I came back. And so by the end of the time I worked on it, I would know a whole lot more about the topic, and also someone else would be able to read about it. And so it's the intertwining, I guess, of the teaching and the learning is, I think, one of the most interesting things about Wikipedia. And I guess also is, maybe one of the weaknesses of Wikipedia, right? Because I think that ties in with the well, I think, like, a lot of people, when they say, well, anyone can put something on Wikipedia and you can't trust what's there, I think the idea that tends to come to mind most readily is that there's some nefarious, there's someone out there who's trying to deceive you, and so they put something in Wikipedia and it's wrong. But there's also the concern that a lot of times when someone's working on something, they don't really understand the topic very well yet, and if nobody else comes along to sort of vet it or take that next step, then you might see sort of a half-formed thought or something that focuses on a narrow part of a topic too much.
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts. One is the participatory nature of Wikipedia is very much the participatory nature of open educational resources. So the idea isn't you're a passive consumer. And this idea actually didn't get exposed, I think, in the early days of open educational resources, but it was always part of the vision. This vision of creating a much more collaborative, community-based, open-sourced way to share knowledge, with knowledge as a public good. And to the comment and to the naysayers who argue that, an article isn't as strong or it could have erroneous content, that's true. And it's really up to the community, to all of us. If we see that article and we know that's wrong, then we should be participating in correcting. Well,
so let me ask you about that, because I think within the Wikipedia world, often the way that point is made is that the idea is that it's up to the Wikipedia community to make sure that the content is right. But I have the feeling you're talking about a different community.
Right. So I'm talking about all of us in the community. And I'm thinking
like the open educational resources community, or the world, the community.
I think anyone who reads an article, if you're an expert and you're reading an article, or you read something that you are definitively, just because of your expertise and what you've worked in your experiences, in some ways that behooves all of us, if you're going to that article, to correct that. So I think one of the tensions and challenges has been, both in probably the Wikipedia and the OER community, is there's a set of early adopters, early leaders. In the Wikipedia, there's the Wikipedians, and you have to be a Wikipedian to contribute, which isn't really what people expect, but it's kind of what's permeating a little bit of society. And in open educational resources, there's been a set of early adopters, and it's been hard to make the boundaries more permeable so that people feel like they can dip in and out, which I think is really important. Yeah. And so I think part of Wikipedia and part of Wikipedia for the future and for OER for the future, is to figure out how to make those boundaries much more permeable, so people can come in and to readily share. So it isn't more difficult than it has to be. It doesn't rely on technical savviness. It's just all the pieces are easier. And I think technology is coming there. We're now all beginning to understand the sharing cultures in ways that we didn't 15 years ago. So I think the world has changed, and I think all of that's exciting and important for the Wikipedia movement.
Well, I think the technological hurdles certainly should come down, and I think there are always efforts to make improvements around that. I think there's also this the issues of the social barriers. I mean, there's the kind of social barriers that definitely should come down, but are tricky, as far as people just being sort of not on their best behavior on Wikipedia. So when you first try to do something, someone might give you some pushback, but it's not very useful. You don't really understand what you did wrong. You feel hurt. You feel like your contribution wasn't welcomed. So that sucks, right? That's, that really shouldn't be the case. But I think it's something we're always going to have to do. If we really want to be the encyclopedia anyone can edit, that means we're going to have 15-year-olds that don't really have a sophisticated, sense of how to speak to someone in a professional way versus how they might talk to their best friend, or people who are very passionate about their field and they have a very strong idea and they don't necessarily recognize that you don't come in with guns blazing right at the beginning, but you sort of build up a sense of how people work around you. And I think like all of those issues are they're always going to be there. And I sort of wonder about how do we, I guess my hope, my sort of biggest aspiration around Wikipedia is that we would just get better at as a society through dealing with stuff like Wikipedia. We would start to learn those social skills, those professional skills more deeply. But I'm not sure if that's, that's a pretty big ambition.
Well, I mean, what you raise is society and people engaging in conflict in a professional way and listening to each other's side. And, in some cases in knowledge, there is a right and a wrong, and so it maybe it's not just understanding people's feelings, but it's really trying to come to the truth as close as can be identified, using data sources, right, to back that up. And then it isn't always just two individuals, right? This is a community. Sure. And there's more than one person who's, overseeing an article, although there's a key person. So I think, it plays out in so many different formats. It's a group of teachers sitting around the table during the summer developing curriculum, right? It's that happens now. Yeah. And then also, I think in many ways, a lot of the content, or some of the content in thinking about higher education, which has a different form of learning, which has professors who are the knowledge brokers in higher education, who historically have taught in boxes to their 30 students and aren't transparent because they're holding their intellectual property, because that's the knowledge they're contributing. And what I would say to add to your vision is to say that we have to go back to education being the public good. Right? Education is a public good, and a public good should be freely shared. And many institutions, whether they're K-12, and there's public institutions, the districts throughout this country and around the world, higher ed, which are state-supported districts, it's all for the public good. And so I think we have to find new ways in this day and age of embracing this knowledge sharing even more readily than we do.
I agree. Yeah, excellent point. So let's bring this to a close with a thought about the future. So if we're celebrating 15 years of Wikipedia, yeah, what should the next 15 years look like? What should the next 5 years look like? What do you hope to see Wikipedia doing better in that kind of time frame?
So I think of two things. One is this idea of community and participatory that we touched on. I think, and I've heard from, my conversations with Wikipedians and the leadership there, that one of the challenges is continuing to embrace a broad community, or somehow galvanize that broad community. And I think that is a cornerstone to Wikipedia's survival. So not only those who are the incredible volunteers and contributors and Wikipedians today, but broadening out those concentric circles. I think that's a very similar tension for open educational resources. There's a small community, there's early adopters, it's been broadening, but we want to make it mainstream. And I think it's very similar in Wikipedia, we want that to happen as well. And then I think the other piece too is really to think about, you talked about content, and it was interesting thinking about content as articles, and thinking about the evolution of learning from the few who are in monasteries to those who become educated in one-room schoolhouses or educated by their educated parents, to those who in this country had the advantage of going to elite universities in the early part of the century, to now really trying to democratize learning. And I think the form of an article has been a great way to do that. But I also think as technology has changed, as we've seen the rise of video, we've seen the consumption, I wonder, and I don't know the answer, but I wonder if the article is the right media. Mm-hmm. And it could be the right media, but it could be the right media with other extensions. And is that something that will evolve naturally? Yep. Or should Wikipedia stay in this content domain, which is so strong, and there will be others that will come around and support additional dimensions? And so I think about that with all of us, with our smartphones, with the rise of phones throughout the world. I think the ability to level the playing field is there. And I just like to say congratulations to Wikipedia. They've done an amazing job.
Okay.
Wikipedia.
Well, thanks so much for having this conversation, Cathy. And I look forward to talking to you on the panel next weekend and digging into this stuff a little more deeply. and we'll continue the conversation there.
Okay, thanks so much, Pete. Talk to you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye-bye.